So here we are again, right in the middle of chaos that's almost too ridiculous to believe. Honestly, it feels like the situation's gone off the rails, and the irony is impossible to ignore. The United States keeps sending out mixed signals. On one hand, Washington wants to look strong against China, to prove it's still in charge. But on the other hand, they simply don't have the cards to play that game. Even the very products they're cutting back on, they're still being made in China. The hypocrisy writes itself. Just a few days ago, Trump confidently said there'd be no call with President Xi. But the moment that statement hit the headlines, the market flipped. If you were watching the charts, you saw the Dow Jones plunge, then suddenly swing back into positive territory. Why? Because Washington pulled a complete U-turn and confirmed that a meeting between Trump and Xi was actually back on. Investors jumped with relief. Markets crave stability, not confusion, and traders will take any hint of peace over another round of tension. Everyone knows an escalation in tariffs would hurt the US far more than it would China. And here's where it gets strategic. Beijing understands exactly where America's weakness lies: rare earth materials. These aren't just some obscure minerals. They're the backbone of modern technology. Everything from advanced weapons and fighter jets to semiconductors and electric vehicles depend on them. Even the US auto industry can't move without China's rare earth supply. American officials like Greer have already admitted that China's export restrictions are hammering their industrial sector. With inflation and cost pressures already through the roof, another disruption like this would be a nightmare. What's even more fascinating is how China turned the tables using Washington's own playbook. The same kind of export controls the US used in the chip war, Beijing's now applying them. Only this time on a far wider scale. Rare earths touch nearly every industry on the planet, from high-end tech to the most basic manufacturing. China's new regulation looks harmless on paper. Any foreign company that uses Chinese rare earths, even a fraction, as little as 0.1% of a product's total value, must now apply for a special export license from Beijing. So even if your product costs $100 and contains just 10 cents worth of Chinese minerals, you need government approval. It sounds like paperwork, but it's really power. Beijing can now decide who gets to sell products to the US, and who doesn't. Companies that refuse to play by China's rules could lose access entirely, which means losing their supply chain overnight. That's not a trade rule. That's leverage. A bargaining chip so powerful it could shift the next global trade war before it even begins. And the reaction in Washington proves just how worried they are. Trump, Greer, Besson, the entire team is in panic mode. The US has started quietly buying up stakes in rare earth mining companies around the world, trying to secure supply lines before it's too late. It started with Trilogy Metals in Alaska, and now they're moving toward Australia, targeting more than a dozen mining firms. The moment this news broke, those companies' stock prices went through the roof. But here's the real catch. The US can't decide whether to dig these minerals up at home or simply buy control overseas. Domestic mining is brutally expensive and faces strict environmental limits. But buying up supply chains abroad is a temporary fix at best. Because mining is just one part of the puzzle. Rare earths in their raw state are practically useless. They have to be refined and processed before they can be used. And that's where China dominates almost entirely. Around 90% of global rare earth processing happens in China, while Malaysia covers roughly 12%. No other country comes close. This is the real choke point. It's not about who owns the mines. It's about who controls the refining process. And that's something the US can't replicate overnight. Even if America somehow mines enough rare earths domestically, it would still likely need to send them to China for processing. That's the hard truth Washington doesn't want to admit. China doesn't just control the supply chain, it controls the system itself. The trade war shows no sign of slowing down, and the longer it drags on, the more the United States risks being locked out of China's industrial heart. Its vast network of processing plants that power the modern world. It's a threat decades in the making, and one Washington can't easily undo. The trillion-dollar question now is simple but brutal. Can America strike back strongly enough to make China back off? Tariffs clearly aren't the answer. Despite every wave of US duties, China's total exports climbed more than 8% in September. Their trade web has spread across continents, so much that losing the American market barely dents the surface anymore. And that's exactly why Beijing can hold a firmer tone in every negotiation. Yes, exports to the US have fallen by roughly 30%, but that loss has been replaced, and then some, by surging growth in Africa, Southeast Asia, Latin America, and even Europe. These new partners are buying in record numbers. Ironically, it was Washington's own tariff strategy that helped push them there. Nations everywhere still need low-cost goods to keep factories running and inflation in check. And China remains the only player that can deliver both. What's more, the nature of China's exports has changed. The era of cheap toys and t-shirts is over. The country's power now lies in advanced manufacturing, shipbuilding, semiconductors, and electric vehicles. These three sectors alone have exploded in growth, 42%, 32%, and 11%. Each one anchors China deeper into the global supply chain. Producing chips or EVs anywhere else is harder and costlier, especially when the critical minerals are right next door. That leaves Washington with its hands tied. But instead of cooling tensions, the US is pivoting into stranger territory. President Trump's latest idea? A retaliatory strike on Chinese cooking oil. Yes, cooking oil. Because Beijing cut back on American soybean imports, Washington is threatening a countermove that borders on the absurd. But numbers tell the story. Last year, China shipped about $1.2 billion worth of cooking oil to the US. Barely a drop in the bucket compared to the $12.6 billion worth of soybeans it bought from America. This year, China's oil exports to the US have already plunged 43%, and Beijing can easily reroute the rest to hungry markets across Asia. If the plan goes through, Asia benefits from cheaper supply. Prices fall, consumers win. But in the US, it's another blow to households already struggling with rising costs. A so-called cooking oil war would do little more than make groceries more expensive for Americans. Across the Atlantic, Europe faces its own kind of desperation. The continent's factories are fading, choked by high energy prices and dwindling competitiveness. Without Russian gas, production costs have soared. And with mountains of regulation, innovation has slowed to a crawl. In the global race for technology, Europe has fallen alarmingly behind. Consider artificial intelligence. China now holds over 60% of global AI patents, more than 35,000 in 2022. The US holds roughly 21%. Europe and the UK together? Barely 2%. The gap is massive, and it extends far beyond AI, reaching deep into chips, batteries, and next-generation vehicles. So, in a move that borders on desperation, Brussels is exploring a new policy: forced technology transfer. The idea is simple. If a Chinese company wants to invest in the EU, it must hand over part of its technology to local partners. It's a stunning reversal of the rules Europe once promoted. The goal isn't AI or solar energy, it's electric vehicles. Europe wants China's EV secrets, better batteries, cheaper designs, and faster production methods. Officials argue that this will create real jobs and value added in Europe. But the truth is harder to face. Even if Europe manages to secure today's technology, the rest of the world won't wait. While Brussels tries to master version 1.0, the US and China will already be building versions 2.0 and 3.0. The biggest danger is that China simply walks away. Its investments in Europe, worth more than $8 billion a year, are concentrated in autos. If that capital evaporates, Europe's last hope of industrial revival fades with it, and the US won't come to help. America's reshoring push is about bringing factories home, not exporting them to Germany or France. This is the fractured world of 2025, one where trade wars have turned into technology battles, and economic policy feels more like theater than strategy. We've reached a point where even cooking oil can become a weapon. The global order that once drove prosperity is splintering before our eyes. So what happens next? Will Trump truly ignite a cooking oil war? Will China bow to Europe's demands for forced tech sharing? Or are we simply watching the slow unraveling of global cooperation itself? Let me know what you think down below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe as we continue to uncover the strange, unpredictable story of our world economy.